Chainsaws are the coolest weapon ever. Of course, they're not the most effective weapon ever, even the weakest handgun can be more efficient in matters of taking a life, and yeah, they're definitely not the most iconic weapon ever. I mean, swords and all of its variants exist, you know? But what chainsaws are is a show, and a really stylish one at that.
You're already dead.
I don't really think that any other tool of violence comes even close to the level of coolness that a chainsaw can easily achieve by just being there. They are noisy, bold, powerful and confident, and everything about it helps to build this image of a weapon of pure ultra-violence. Throughout my life, I always felt really attracted to works of fiction that feature chainsaws, even if just for brief moments. There is something to them that really captivates my poor little heart, and that whenever I see on a screen makes me go hell yeah. So I wanted to use this video as a way to untangle my feelings and express my ideas about the weapon once and for all, and maybe to promote even more the mythos of it. I love chainsaws. I want to see them more, in more works, in different settings, and in different ways, and I'll do my best to tell you why I feel that way so passionately. Because, you see, I really think that chainsaws are the coolest weapon ever. And tell me, what a better way to start talking about the chainsaws in fiction than to speak about the movie that first helped to build the most typical conventions of the weapon. I'm talking, obviously, about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre was originally created as a social commentary on many different things relevant at the time. Those things range from vegetarianism to traditional nuclear families to misinformation by big industries and the government, yada yada yada. But the main thing that the movie wanted to comment on, and the real focus of it, was the incredible levels of violence that the media was reaching in the 60s. It's really important to know this, because the character of Leatherface is probably the epitome of this idea. Everything about him is built upon this theme of being the absolute peak of human ability to be violent, and his weapon of choice reinforces that. The scenes where Leatherface gets to wave around his roaring mechanical beast are some of the best things the early slasher genre has to offer, and are definitely anxiety-inducing for someone who's watching the movie for the first time. Just think about the chases, the death of Franklin, that ultra-iconic last shot of him dancing. I mean, don't get me wrong, there were other instances before this of chainsaws being used as a weapon of evil, my favorite example definitely being the Wizard of Gore. But it wasn't until the Texas Chainsaw Massacre that the chainsaw would finally find his well-deserved place in fiction. I find this movie really fascinating when speaking about the mythos of the chainsaw, because most of what makes it so cool can be traced back to this exact movie. I mean, the roaring of the motor, the fear it imposes, the bloody mess it's able to do. Even Leatherface himself can be considered the first example of a chainsaw maniac archetype, one that will become really popular for many antagonists in horror movies and also in video games, such as Resident Evil 4 with the already iconic Dr. Salvador, and The Evil Within with the sadist. Chainsaws are just really good for horror media. They are so good as a weapon of evil because they truly feel like an unstoppable force, like a machine so decisive in its nature that it trivializes the conflict for the side who wields it. That's exactly why we usually don't see protagonists wielding chainsaws, because it kinda ruins the tension seeing them with such a powerful weapon. But I really can't deny that a few times we do get to see them using one, it's really satisfactory. Evil Dead actually has a funny story with chainsaws. You see, a little piece of trivia I really like about this movie is that in the original poster and trailer for the film, we get to see Ash wielding a chainsaw in what appears to be pure blind rage, about to attack something we don't know yet. I'm sure the image of a horror protagonist getting to use this weapon was really attractive for many fans of the horror genre. On one hand, because this tool was at that point almost always relegated to the hands of the antagonist, and on the other, because if you are giving your protagonist a chainsaw, then the opposing force has to be something really bad to still be a match. But, as fate will have it, the chainsaw will briefly appear and then not get used by either Ash or the forces of evil. Good thing that Sam Raimi will end up noticing that chainsaws are fucking incredible and will then give it another shot in Evil Dead 2, where it became one of the main weapons in Ash's arsenal, giving us some really iconic scenes such as the hand mutilation and posterior replacement with a chainsaw prosthesis. If this isn't one of the coolest ideas in horror cinema, I don't know what it is. Seeing poor Ash snapping and finally choosing to take the offensive after 2 days of horrible punishment and just barely surviving with his bad luck feels just so good. The chainsaw becomes this symbol of hope and willpower, using ultra-violence for a better purpose, turning Ash from a lone survivor into a full-on action hero. The chainsaw will go on to appear in Army of Darkness, although just for 10 minutes or so before being replaced by a far more functional but less cool Metal Hand. It's kinda funny though, because this is kinda the same case as in Evil Dead 1. I mean, look at this and tell me you wouldn't expect more chainsaw action from this. Anyway, the chainsaw will then appear again in the spin-off series Ash vs. the Evil Dead, this time finally staying as the melee weapon of choice of Ash, and getting the place in his arsenal that was rightfully deserved since the beginning. I really like this series. It captures really well the essence of the original movies, and it has some of the best special effects in the franchise. I would love to show some of the coolest skills with the weapon in the series, but the video will most likely get age restricted and I really want people to find this channel, so maybe go give the series a shot. I assure you that you'll love it. Anyway, these two are by far my favorite representations of the chainsaw in the film media, and they very well encapsulate almost everything that I love about them in a movie. They are strong, noisy, chaotic, lethal, messy, and a power fantasy compacted in a machine. They are one of the most satisfying weapons to see in action, and one of the most terrifying to see against our heroes. But of course, that's just talking about movies. There are works in other forms of media where the chainsaw also gets an opportunity to shine, and that's where I want to continue this video. You see, when I was first starting to read manga, I wasn't really sure just where to begin. Sure, I always had JoJo, Berserk, and the manga version of the anime I was already watching, but I really wanted to discover new stories that could only be born from the Japanese culture that I was already in love with at the time. Among the many options, one stood out for me like the blinding lights of a lighthouse in a dark night. One name that was so bizarre, so out of the lines of understanding I had at the time, that I genuinely believe what I saw just couldn't exist in real life. I'm talking, obviously, about Chainsaw Man. Of course, we live in a world where Chainsaw Man is one of the biggest and most beloved franchise for all of those in love with otaku culture. But at the time, the idea of a Chainsaw Man anime was still an impossible wish, and honestly, it didn't matter for me. A quick glance at the volume cover, and I was in for whatever the fuck Tatsuki Fujimoto wanted to show me. I mean, just think for a second about how you felt the first time that you read the name. Chainsaw Man. It feels surreal, almost reads like the name of a B-action movie to enjoy with some friends and nothing more. But the genius of Fujimoto built a world so interesting, full of characters so well written, that it took this deeply bizarre premise of a boy that can become a living chainsaw and developed it into a masterpiece. Now, being honest, I could spend some good hours just speaking about Chainsaw Man and everything I love about it, but this video is about chainsaws, and that's what I'll briefly discuss. Because in my opinion, Denji is the best protagonist to embody the spirit of the weapon. He's bold, rash, ultra violent and imprecise with his attacks. He mostly just waves his arms around, hitting and killing everything either by pure luck or pure craziness. This alone could be enough, and it already gives us some really great moments, such as his first fight against the zombie devil and his army of undead, or the fight against the Devil of Eternity, where he finds a way to defeat an immortal devil by hurting him so much he forces him to commit suicide just to stop the pain. And even though I really love Denji's use of the chainsaws, the one thing I love even more are the reactions of horror that the devils make when they notice just how many loose screws this guy has. Here you have the beings literally born from the fear humanity has against them. Each devil is stronger the more they fear it, and they all tremble at the sight of a chainsaw maniac coming for them. It's glorious. I still haven't read part 2, as I'm waiting for its ending to read it all in 1 or 2 days, but the first part connects with me in so many personal ways that I seriously believe I will not be the same person if I had never read it. And everything began with a weird premise and a bizarre name that I just couldn't bring myself to ignore. Now, one medium that one might assume is the one that can best take advantage of the coolness of the chainsaw is video games. I mean, if seeing a chainsaw in action feels incredible, imagine how it must feel to use one to do a carnage. This might sound cool, but strangely, I tend to believe that chainsaws are more of a hit or miss in video games. Mostly because I think they are far more complicated to adapt because of the feedback. You see, in movies and series, chainsaws are far easier to adapt because we only see them and hear them, so you don't really have to worry about those two things. Video games are far more difficult, because on top of all of that, you have to ask yourself, how do we make our players feel the chainsaw? How do we accurately portray this power tool through the means of a screen and a joystick? It may sound simple at first, but you will be impressed by how easily they can be fucked up. I mean, just look at the chainsaw from the Silent Hill 2 remake and tell me it doesn't look like a glorified death stick. You touch the enemies and they don't react, they just kinda die and that's it. There is no blood, no crunchiness, no soul, no nothing. It's kinda weird because the chainsaw in the original Silent Hill 2, it's really awesome actually. One of my favorites indeed. You can actually see the saw cutting through your enemies. Plus there is a Texas Chainsaw Massacre reference. How can I not love it? As a rule of thumb, when using chainsaws in video games, other than the sound of the motor and the goriness it can cause, see the effects you have on your enemies, and then ask yourself, I am using a chainsaw or a sword with the skin of a chainsaw? That's really the only way of knowing if it really has it. And one franchise that I think does it really well is the Doom games. Since Doom 2 back in 1994, the chainsaw was a weapon of pure destruction that annihilates everything in front of it, leaving only a red puree from the body of your enemies. The constant noise, the bloody mess, and the screams of pain from the demons really give the chainsaw a feeling of power, only really stopped by the fact that it's a melee weapon, so you have to get close and eat some damage to properly use it. I don't mean that in a bad way. I really think that the best nerf you can give to this weapon is to force your players to get close and personal. Kinda the same philosophy goes in the GTA games, where chainsaws exist, they are really powerful and kill everyone in one hit, but good luck surviving against enemies with handguns. The chainsaw will go on to appear again in Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal, in quite a different way, being less of a formal weapon and more like an utility. But I really like it. Now, every time you want to use it, you have to get close to them and just... It feels good, you know? Of course, you can't go straight into them and brrrr them to death like in the older games, but I just really love how these animations somehow get the feeling of the chainsaw. This layer surely gets the kill, and in a violent and painful way, but you can also briefly see how the saw struggles to cut through the bone, and that little detail really makes a world of difference. It's really cool. I really want to see what they're gonna do with the shield saw in Doom the Dark Ages, but I just know that whatever it is, I'm just gonna love it. Moving on, first I have to say that this is probably my favorite interpretation of a chainsaw in any form of media. I'm talking about the whirligig saw from Bloodborne. Although not exactly a chainsaw but rather a circular buzzsaw attached to the end of a mace, the whirligig saw works in such a way that using it resembles too much the experience of wielding a chainsaw. And I find it to be the most fun weapon in the whole game. The attacks range from simple swings with the sword, cover a large area and can hit multiple enemies if well placed, to charge attacks that take a huge amount of the enemy's health and launches them to the air. And if that wasn't enough, you can also use it in the most classic of ways, just holding L2 and cornering your enemies while their health bar slowly disappears before the metal of your soul. It's really satisfying. I really love to enter the game every once in a while and just brum some of the weaker enemies, stun-locking them and tearing them apart. Plus, the weapon has a great bonus of damage against beast-type enemies, which are the great majority of the enemies in the game, so yay! The whirligig saw is such a cool weapon concept that From Software used it again in Elden Ring with the Gisa's wheel. A weapon that I can't really speak much about because I still haven't used it by myself, but just by the looks I can easily tell what they were going for. For now, I just know that I'll keep coming back to Jarnam every few times a year, because whirligig will always be there for me, and we always go back to where we were happy. Now, I know some of you will probably already be familiarized with Fear and Hunger, but just in case, I'll say the basics. Imagine that you live in the Berserk universe, and you're one of those random guys that get brutally killed just to show how horrible the world is, okay? Got it? Well, that's Fear and Hunger for you. You get mauled, you lose limbs, you get lost with the constant fear of having to face something horrible, and then you have to face something horrible. And that's just the beginning. I still haven't talked about the crucifixion. These games are cruel, brutal, not for everybody, and I just really love them. They are like one of the only games where I actually feel like I have to fear for my life. So, if you're interested in playing them, most specifically its sequel, Fear and Hunger 2 Termina, I invite you to play them and skip this little part of the video, because I'm going to spoil one of its biggest scares. You see, in Fear and Hunger Termina, you are put in the ravaged city of Perhevil by the will of some crazy moon god. And if you walk around long enough in the city, this will happen to you. I can't really explain just how terrified I was the first time I was ambushed by the mob. You have to understand that usually one single enemy that you aren't prepared for is a real threat that could easily make you lose hours of progress. So when these three guys cornered me ready to kill me, I felt a sense of hopelessness that I'm yet to feel in real life. And the great responsible of this was this guy, this unique enemy in the game that is only identified by his weapon of choice, the meat grinder. An enemy designed with a chainsaw maniac archetype in mind that really puts you in the shoes of a victim. Each one of his attacks hits 3 times, causing bleeding effect and cutting limbs left and right. Just one hit can be enough to kill one of your party members, and the turn you try to heal is a turn you let the meat grinder attack again. He's the real opponent in this fight, the real test of endurance you must overcome to see if you have what's needed to complete the game. And if you do and somehow manage to beat them, you will get one of the pieces to craft the meat grinder, the best weapon in the game. The same fear you felt now becomes an extreme sense of power, of desire to find out what are your limits and just how far you can go just with this. It's the cruel universe of fear and hunger against you and your meat grinder. And you have a good chance of winning. Actually, just in case, I warn you that using the meat grinder could kinda ruin your game in a way. Not in the sense that it's bugged or something like that, but in the sense that the moment you get your hands on this weapon, this cruel and horrible world becomes a playground for you. That's the power of a chainsaw. I think I could go on and on all day mentioning chainsaws I love and explaining why I love them. I could mention the chainsaw from Left 4 Dead 2, the Reaper from the Fallout games, or the Lancer from Gears of War. But really, I think you get the idea already, and I don't want to start repeating myself or overcomplicating things. I think that's probably the worst way to end a video about why I love chainsaws. Because, you see, no matter how much I try to explain it, the thing is that they are very simple. It's the noise, the weight of the machine, the strength needed to use it, the way the saw cuts through everything with struggle, yes, but also with certainty. I think it's the simplicity it has, while also having violence so ingrained in its pure essence. That's probably what makes it the coolest tool of violence we have ever built. Now, while we end this video, I want to take the chance and briefly talk about a game I'm really excited for. It's called Motor's Lines. It still is a work in progress and I don't really know when it's gonna be ready other than, well, this year. So I'm not working with much here. And what I can tell you about Motor's Lines is that the protagonist is a blue-haired chainsaw tomboy and you can use a chainsaw to do parkour. If you vibe with that, even a little, please go and check out the trailer. Maybe give it a like and add it to your Steam wishlist. I'm really hoping for it to come out. I'm sure it's gonna be cool. Chainsaws are an incredibly fun and cool weapon. I really love them and want to see more others from different forms of media giving them a shot and a place in their works. If done correctly and with just a little care, they can add a lot of style to almost anything. Be an essential part of the soul in your work. We all love to have fun.